Ladies and gentlemen, today we have a very special guest from New York, Mr. Jamil Ahmad, who is the Director at UNEP at the New York Secretariat of the United Nations, is visiting Pakistan. He's our batchmate, one of our brightest officers, and now working in a very serious position at the UN. He is actually, I must say, is our gift to the United Nations. He is our loss because he left early and then he joined UNEP. And there, mashallah, he's doing really well. Welcome, Jamil, to our program. We are really fortunate to have you here with us today. To begin with, we would request you to kindly let us know what your office does overall for the environment in the world.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you here in the Ambassador's Lounge. I represent the United Nations Environment Program, which is the world global authority in the UN family for environment. What we do is to keep the world environment under review by producing scientific assessments, by congregating and convening the world environmental leaders, environment ministers, and all other leaders of environment from civil society and from academia to come and discuss environmental issues of the world in the United Nations Environment Assembly. United Nations Environment Assembly is the legislative organ of the United Nations Environment Program. We are headquartered in Kenya, in Nairobi, and the Environment Assembly meets every 2 years, and it discusses all issues which relate to sustainable development, to pollution, to climate change, global warming, and all other matters which can affect the environment of the world.
So it's a huge agenda. Before I pass the floor on to our dear friend, other panelist, Mr. Ambassador Amjad Sher, can you kindly enlighten us as to the recent developments that have taken place in your agency?
The last meeting of the United Nations Environment Assembly took a number of major decisions on environment. One of the most important one related to the regulation of the use of plastics. As you know, plastic is a bane and plastic is a curse now in terms of its effects on the world, on the earth, on the environment. It has some good purposes. It has served well in the past 50 years. But now, with the misuse of the plastic and especially the single-use plastic, we are throwing into oceans about 8 billion tons of plastic every year. We are spoiling the air because of plastic pollution, and then the microplastic degenerates into our food system also. So the World Environment Ministers, they decided to convene an international negotiating committee for developing a global treaty, a legally binding treaty on plastics, which will regulate the use of plastic from the generation, from the production to the end, the whole life cycle of plastics. And by 2024, we hope to have this treaty finalized and then ratified. This will be a milestone achievement. Our organization has also, I would say, developed and also pioneered a number of other environmental agreements. This includes the agreement on mercury, banning the use of mercury and other chemicals. The ozone layer treaty was also a very important agreement which United Nations Environment Program was the main force behind it. So all these important environmental agreements are the brainchild, you can say, of the environmental minister under the umbrella of the United Nations Environment Program.
That's wonderful. You have a large canvas, it means, Jamil. And we keep reading your articles in wherever they appear, and also follow you on Twitter. It's a great pleasure. So let me now request Ambassador Amjad Sher to ask you a few questions.
Welcome, Mr. Jamil, to Pakistan. As you know, scientists on climate and environmentalists have been warning the world about the gradual deterioration of the climate and environment. And they have also claim that the major developed countries are responsible for this climate and environment deterioration. So could you please update us about the current environment and climate situation at the global level?
Well, climate change or global warming now poses an existential threat to life on planet. If we go back to the story of how it developed, we'll have to go back to the Industrial Revolution, from where the story of global warming started, because that was the point in which the world started using the world resources at a very fast pace, at a pace which was more than the regenerative capacity of the planet. And since then, we have used these resources, which are finite, in a very indiscriminate manner. And that has led to generation of greenhouse gases, especially carbon dioxide, as a result of the industrial activity that is happening in the industrial world. Obviously, the industrial world was the main producer of greenhouse gases so far, but now many other countries are also contributing to greenhouse gases. Unfortunately, despite many efforts over the last 2 decades, I would say, the world is still on course to 1.2 degrees, I would say, and maybe more degrees Celsius rise in temperature, in global temperature, since the 1990 benchmark. The Paris Agreement was one of the landmark agreement, which unfortunately is also not on course. Recently, we had the COP meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, which took some important decisions. And the Secretary General is very much concerned about these developments, and he has called another climate summit this year in September in New York, which will provide a political momentum to the degrees, to the agreements that were the result of the COP meetings in Sharm el-Sheikh, and also other environmental meetings that are taking place under other conventions of environment, like the Biodiversity Convention and the Desertification Convention, and many others which are also under discussion in other forums.
It looks like a lot of work at the UN, that UN is involved in. Jamil, can we request you to kindly throw some light on the situation in our region?
Well, the situation in South Asia, for that matter, is alarming, like many other regions, of course. But the fact that South Asia, or Asia for that matter, is housing the bulk of the world population, which is being affected by global warming in one way or the other. We have pollution, air pollution, water pollution. Then we have the effects of the plastic waste and plastic pollution, which are also alarming. But more than that, we are suffering because of deforestation, which is happening at a very fast rate here in this region and also in this country. So these multiply the woes of climate and environment in this region.
Thank you so much. Can we now move, closer to home, and because we have had these devastating floods, and the loss was running into billions, scores of billions. What do you think was the actual reason, particularly in the context of Pakistan?
Well, scientific studies show that global warming is causing environmental disasters. The frequency and the intensity of these disasters has increased over the years. Floods, hurricanes, cyclones, forest fires, and many other types of environmental disasters are attributed by scientists to climate change and global warming. So we can safely say that most of these environmental disasters have climate change as a source, as a reason. And that is why the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, in its regular reporting, has been warning us that we have to take care of climate and global warming in a way to prevent the recurrence of these environmental disasters.
When the UN Secretary General visited Pakistan after the floods, he appeared very convinced and very moved by the devastation caused and by the human suffering. Is the UN in a position to actually help Pakistan financially, or it is more sort of, requesting the member states that they should help us?
UN has recently convened a meeting in Geneva for the flood victims under Secretary General's guidance and leadership. And the convening power of UN is the main force with which the UN is trying to sell this story, this deadly story of devastation that was caused by floods in Pakistan and many other places. So the UN doesn't have its own funds. The funds are given by member states, but UN is helping in big way. The UN Development Program, United Environment Program, and other UN agencies, they have joined hands to provide relief to the victims of disasters, environmental disasters, and they're also helping with governments to develop resilience to these environmental disasters in the future. So if there is a disaster in the future, God forbid, the society as a whole should have resilience to do that. If for climate change, we do adaptation to adapt to the negative impact of climate change through various means and various measures. And the meeting in Egypt last December decided that they will double the amount of funding for adaptation. They also decided to establish a special fund for loss and damages, which are caused to the developing countries because of climate change. And that fund is going to be operationalized by the end of next year when the next COP meeting takes place in Abu Dhabi in December. Sorry, this year, not next year.
Jamil, you know that in 2010 there was also massive devastating floods in Pakistan, and that was a warning sign for all of us. And now recently we have these in all four provinces, devastating floods in which there was this loss to the property and life. And glaciers in Pakistan, they are also melting. So what is the way forward, and how do you see that how this can be reversed?
Well, the best way is to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels so that we have less emissions. That is a global issue. Global warming is because of our dependence of the world for generation of power, generation of industry, energy, dependence on fossil fuels. So if we can reduce our dependence on gas and oil and go to renewables and go to green energy, energy which is not harmful to the environment, and also to have resource efficiency. So if you can do more with less, that will be the way out. Global warming, as you mentioned, glacial melting is one aspect of global warming. Sea rise is another one. And then massive deforestation that is happening is also a cause which leads to environmental disaster because of soil erosion and because of flash flooding that happens when deforestation takes place. So we need to be cognizant of the fact that if we don't act now, we can have more severe, intense environmental disasters in the future. And to stop them from happening, we have to do more forestation, more green cover, and go to renewables.
Thank you, Jamil. Let me ask you maybe the last question. What do you think are Pakistan's main, problems that come from the, global warming and other environmental issues, and how good we are in terms of, educating the masses, educating the children, so that, in another 5-10 years, we have a crop of educated people who understand the environmental issues, and then they can, be helpful in mitigating them.
Very good question. I think normally when we talk of environment, we prepare and we say this gloom and doom scenario. But I must say that there is a lot of awareness among youth in Pakistan and around the world, and that is a sign of hope. We have a youth bulge in this country, we have a youth bulge in South Asia, we have a youth bulge in Africa. And these young people very well know that their future is at stake. Our generations and the previous generations, they have not done well to care for the environment. But this new generation, the young generation, they are very much aware, and they are forcing countries and governments and politicians and policy makers and scientists to take the right and make the right decisions. In our case, one of the big issues that we face here in Pakistan is pollution of air. And pollution of air is very closely related to health issues, to public health. Around the world, around 7 million people every year, they lose their lives because of bad air. Every second person perhaps now is 9 out of 10 people, they breathe air which is polluted. Then water pollution is equally a big issue. For that, we need to make sure that policymakers take decisions and implement them in a way with the engagement of youth and with the engagement of civil society, because action has to start on ground, and that's where the say and the views of the youth are important. I must say that the youth of Pakistan is very much engaged on this issue. They attend meetings in the Conference of Parties of Climate Conventions and others, and they are raising hope for climate action at a fast pace.
Thank you so much, Jamil. So it looks like situation is not as bad as some people portray. At the same time, we should be, hopeful. What do you think the forthcoming summit that the UN is going to host later this year? What kind of hopes we should pin with that?
Well, the Secretary General, as I said, is very much engaged with politicians, with political leaders around the world for implementation of the agreements that have taken place in all these meetings, and he wants to use the momentum that has been generated by these meetings for active and for action, urgent action on climate. So the meeting in September in New York on the sidelines of the General Assembly will be another occasion for the world leaders to recommit themselves to urgent action on climate, on all aspects of climate. The situation is alarming, but we have hope, and the hope comes from the commitment of leaders, political leaders, and political policymakers.
Jamil, Pakistan's contribution to the environmental degradation is 0.08%, but still we are the major victim of this disaster. What, in your view, should be the measures taken by the government of Pakistan to reduce this disaster?
Well, that's true. The contribution of Pakistan to global greenhouse gas emissions is less than 1%, but Pakistan is among the 10 most vulnerable countries to climate change. But that is not a reason nor an excuse for Pakistan not to take any action. The actions, Pakistan is signatory to most of the environmental agreements, conventions, and treaties, and they have developed policies and plans. Pakistan has produced the nationally, Pakistan has produced policies and plans in accordance with the conventions, the Climate Convention. They have developed their NDCs, the Nationally Determined Contributions. Pakistan has developed Nationally Determined Contribution, the NDCs, which is obligatory under the Convention of Climate Change. Pakistan also reports the implementation of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, to the High-Level Political Forum, which will meet in July this year. So there are policies and plans intact. They are being implemented. What needs to be done is to enhance the implementation through better coordination between the provinces and the federal government, because of some constitutional changes in the country some years ago. There is a need for better coordination of this implementation of the agreements from the ground level, at the ground level. And I think my personal view is that the involvement of local authorities and local bodies, locally elected bodies, will help a lot, because the impact of climate is at local level. It affects communities, it affects people, it affects cities. So if action is also started at that level, it will have a great impact for improving the situation.
Water management, has been a big problem for us. Now we are a water-stressed country, and you can see it all around. And it has, the problem is when you have the glaciers melting, you don't have the storage, and then you have shortage, and then you are, everything, all walks of life are affected. How do we address this?
Oh, that's a very good question, Tariq. I think water lies at the heart of all environmental issues. If water is in abundance, if water is out of control, you have floods. If water is less, you have droughts. If glaciers are melting, it's water. If sea level is rising, it's water. So water is at the center of most of the environmental issues. That's why the United Nations Environment Programme promotes integrated water resource management. We call it IWRM. not to take water in silos, but to address it as a whole. In that sense, water management, as you referred to, is also important because we need to store water which goes waste. We need to better manage water for irrigation. We need to look at crop substitution because of misuse of water resources. Sometimes there is water logging, and in other places there is drought. So water management is important, and as I said, United Nations Environment Programme is helping countries with policy advice and other technical assistance to do better water management for environmental protection.
Thank you, Jamil. It has been an enlightening session, definitely. We, of course, don't focus so much on all these issues that you discussed and so ably discussed here. We would like to thank you on behalf of Ambassadors Lounge for taking out the time to be with us for this interview. And we wish you a safe return to New York. Good luck with your work and best of luck with the summit, forthcoming summit.